Hi, my name is Gareth Haysom. I'm an urban food systems researcher working at the African Centre for Cities at the University of Cape Town. I will talk you through a few key emerging concepts which pertain to urban food systems in African and global South cities. This presentation is on global megatrends and how these influence how we engage with urban food issues. This presentation will first differentiate between a crisis and a trend, clarifying why it is important to focus on these phenomena and explaining their significance and impact on urban food systems. This session will then discuss each of the different standout megatrends affecting urban food systems in Africa, specifically the key food security component of agency. Point 1. Differentiation needed between crises and trend. Crises. This is a time of intense difficulty and danger. Trend is a general direction in which something is moving. Trends are also important because we are currently going through a period of intense change. Point 2. The 5 megatrends that we see as having the most profound impact on the food system, the urban system, and as a result the urban food system are climate change, biodiversity loss and resource depletion, urbanization, demographic shifts and in particular the youth bulge, technological change and work, particularly digitization and informality, and a shift in the global economic power to Asia. It is worth noting 2 factors. Firstly, other scholars might prioritize different trends, and secondly, different megatrends are encountered with different intensity in different regions and at different times by different members of society. Point 3, discussing the different megatrends. Climate change, biodiversity loss and resource depletion. We often engage these issues separately. However, they are all interconnected, especially when considering food. Climate change creates significant challenges to the food system. Not only does it contribute biodiversity loss, but biodiversity loss further contributes to and drives climate change. Biodiversity loss and climate change are not the only factors to bear in mind. Equally important is the wider resource depletion we are observing in multiple regions. A lack of access to fuels used in transportation and oils used for cooking and food manufacturing, etc., for example palm oil, creates significant stresses on the system. From a climate change perspective, if we wish to see a 43% reduction in greenhouse gases aspired to by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC, global greenhouse gas emissions will have to peak before 2025. Current statistics do not give us confidence to believe that we are on track to achieve this. Hence, the most recent climate change report by the IPCC calls for even more radical responses. If we do not consider climate change, many future envisaged challenges will be significantly amplified. The intersections between climate change, biodiversity loss, and resource depletion mean that food production, not just the production of food, but also the constraints on food distribution, will have a profound impact, especially given that many cities lack the capabilities to grow adequate amounts of food to comfortably and effectively feed their urban populations, relying largely on food originating from elsewhere. These issues will compound both food prices, the availability, quality, and variety of available food options. Urbanization. This is an urban food MOOC, therefore urbanization is an important consideration. However, not only is it a consideration, it is a significant megatrend. We argue that our governance structures, as well as our understanding of how the food system worked, has not maintained pace with our rapid transition to a predominantly urban world. Urbanization in the global south is also taking place in a manner that is distinctly different to how we conceptualize and understand urbanization in the global north. For most of the global south, people move into cities, but rarely on account of securing industrial jobs. Society is thus progressively shifting from an industrial to a technological world. In the south, migration is not restricted to cities, but is observed in growing settlements, which possess even more limited industrial employment opportunities. Global South cities are thus not sustaining the formal labor economies associated with the global North. Here, people move largely into informality, in terms of both their housing options and the economic opportunities available to them. Therefore, informal trade, informal industries, small-scale industries, informal modes of transportation, informal modes of education, healthcare, etc. are the norm, rather than the exception in African cities. African governance structures and the systems are not adequately geared towards responding to this informality, with cities aspiring to become progressively and quite rapidly more formal, and thereby look to eliminate rather than regulate their informality. The third megatrend is becoming increasingly prominent, even as it remains difficult to properly isolate and quantify its impact. This demographic shift, which is often referred to as a youth bulge, is observed across the global south, but particularly in Africa, where the current average age is 19.7 years old. A medium which, over the next 10 to 20 years, will continue to drop significantly. Presently, 50% of the people on the African continent are below the age of 18. This cohort is projected to number 1 billion by 2055, and by the turn of the next century, it is estimated that 50% of the global population aged 18 and below will reside in Africa. If we consider the prevalence of unemployment in the formal job market, coupled with increasingly high levels of informality, it is important to consider the future we imagine these youth will inhabit. In a world constrained by resource depletion, climate change, etc., it is a given that an urban youth population will constitute the bulk of the informal workforce. We therefore need to ask significant questions about how youth are factored into and engaged in policy process, especially those pertaining to food. If food enables wellness and creates the opportunity for a good life, how do we start to think of a child-centered food system which takes into account, from the point of newly conceived life, making adequate provision for the nutritional needs of both mother and child? How do we lay the foundations to ensure that the youth conceived today are provided with the optimal conditions and opportunities to thrive? If we fail to make this priority a reality, the populations of the global south will continue to find themselves persistently on the back foot.